The other key for our hobby, right, is to invite the next generation to be excited to join, because otherwise we're just going to keep playing until we're all 80, and then when we're dead, it's dead. And I think that would be really sad.
Welcome to another episode of Three Men and a War Game, or in this case, two men and a couple guests. I am Kevin, who will be your host for the night instead of Paul.
Hey, and this is Potter. I'm here as well.
Awesome. And on the podcast tonight, we have Chris from Slow Death Games and Elijah Kellogg, the designer of Starbreach. Very, very exciting to have you guys both on the podcast.
Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us, guys. Happy to be here.
And Chris, you've been on the podcast before, but just remind everybody, what is Slow Death? What do you guys do? And how did you get into gaming?
Slow Death Games is my game company. We started with a game called Wild in the Streets, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. It's a gang fight game with youth subcultures. We now publish that and Starbreach. We've got some other stuff coming out in the future that we haven't discussed yet. As far as how I got into gaming is around the same time that I got into punk rock, I discovered Dungeons and Dragons, and it's all been uphill from there.
All right, a familiar story. And Elijah, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us how you got into gaming and a little bit maybe of your path into game design. That'd be cool to hear too.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Elijah Kellogg. Also in SoCal with Chris. He's down in San Diego, but I'm up here in LA, and I grew up out here. I got into gaming basically after like a rainy day in 5th grade. One of those where you can't go out to the playground. And so the teacher asked you like, hey, you can bring stuff from home. It's fine. She's like, it's like 3 days in a row. It's been raining. So she's like, whatever, just bring something, do something. So one of my friends brought it was, I believe, a Games Workshop catalog, not a White Dwarf, but just like one of those like old winter catalogs. Right. And I remember when he brought that, it was like his older brothers, and he's like, hey, check this out. Look what I found. And we were like, whoa, this is amazing. So I was totally hooked from that point on. I was like, I know this is what I want to do with my free time. And so I hunted my valley ruthlessly, trying to find someone who sold these weird models. We had no idea where to look. We had no idea where to, at the time, internet was just getting going. It wasn't really that present. We didn't know where to go to find these models. And finally we found a little shop, that was doing like all sorts of models, like, Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. I had some Warhammer stuff, and I just fell in love with WFB, some fantasy battle, and did a bunch of rank and flank for years and years and years. And then eventually got into other games, just not too long ago, about, I'd say 7 years ago, started looking at other games as well, and especially fell in love with Bolt Action when that kind of came out, and really enjoyed some of the mechanics, some of the design. I always thought tabletop was kind of dominated by role play and then like Warhammer stuff. So I didn't know there was other ways to build games. So when I started playing Bolt Action, then I got into like when X-Wing, the first edition of X-Wing came out, I was playing that as well. I was really blown away by these really new, innovative ways to play on the tabletop. And I felt like I wanted to give my hand at it, give it a go. Kind of well before everyone. Now everyone's kind of making their own homebrews and doing things and trying to get those out there, which is rad. I think that's great. But long before that, I was just kind of just poking around with rules I already really liked and kind of putting it all together. And my first game was actually NCO, which is like a squad-based World War II game. Kind of branched off of Bolt Action, just something I wanted that we didn't have, kind of a squad level, like a skirmish level game. And then from there, that eventually, evolved into Starbreach. I've told that story many times, many places, but that eventually evolved into Starbreach, and I finally put it out online, and is crazy how much it's blown up over the years. It's really cool to see people supportive. And Chris, of course, came along eventually and picked it up. And yeah, the rest is history.
Very, very, very cool.
Yeah.
Super awesome.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, let's get into this thing. The first thing I want to talk about is sort of the impetus for this conversation, which is a challenge that Slow Death Games is running. So, Chris, if you want to walk us through that, give us some of the details and the inspiration.
So we can start with the inspiration. There's a guy in our Slow Death Games Discord named Byron, who has been my main gaming opponent for probably the past 10 years. He's a really good friend of mine, and he's helps us out with everything, like comes to conventions to help Slow Death Games, does all sorts of stuff. But he is a prolific painter. Like, you know, when you hear people like, oh, you know, my friend paints really fast, like this is the fastest painter I've ever met in my life. He knocks out stuff like he once like showed me a box that he bought that morning, and that evening it was like done, painted, based, and ready to play with.
Yeah, and I can confirm from being on your Discord, he will like post bare plastic and then painted stuff like hours later.
So,
like,
so this guy's my antithesis, right?
Yeah.
yes.
Where I take like 5 years to paint something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This guy takes like 5 hours.
Yeah. So he, you know, he's always looking for cool minis to paint. And he found this stuff from War Games Atlantic. And he showed it to me. He's like, hey, what do you think of these things? I was like, those are pretty cool. He's like, yeah, I'm going to buy a box and I'm going to make a Starbreach warband out of it. I was like, oh, cool. You know, we'll see what happens. So, you know, he has to wait a couple of days for the box to show up. Box showed up and he's like, hey, dude, check this out. And then, of course, hours later, it's painted. And he's like, I'm good to go. He's like, hey, did you see these other ones? And like he, you know, shows me all these other boxes. He's like, these are cool. These are cool. These are cool. And I'm like, yeah, those are all. He's like, all right, I'm going to get all of them. And so he's doing that. He's showing it off in our Discord, showing it off on his Instagram. And, you know, he's got all the stuff. He's like, yeah, these models are really cool. And they're dirt cheap. Like a box of them is like $35 or something. And you get 20 miniatures. I think that's right. And yeah. And all of us were like, yeah, that's an amazing deal compared to some plastic manufacturers. Like, okay, here's your 5 miniatures and it's $60. So in the Discord, he challenged a bunch of us. He's like, hey, which one of you guys can build something out of this, like out of this box or out of this box? He had specific boxes he kind of challenged us with. And then he's like, yeah, just whatever. Just try it. Just get a box of these things and build a warband out of it. So a bunch of us bought boxes, and we're all excited about it. And then Brendan, who many of you know, had to jump in and give his 2 cents. And he's like, well, yeah, but can you build an entire warband with, you know, what you get in those boxes plus a mech and an alpha or whatever else you need and do it for under $50? And so we're all like, yeah, we could do that. Let's try it. But we ended up actually extending that out to 75 because some people were like, I really want to use this thing. And it's, you know, this thing is $20 by itself, like this one figure. So, you know, we did that. And so we did it. And then we challenged a bunch of other people like, hey, can you do this? And then we reached out to War Games Atlantic and said like, hey, we're doing this thing. Do you want to cross promote it with us? And they were like super stoked on it. They'd never heard of us or never seen the game. And they're like, yes, this is fucking awesome. This is what we want to do. Oh, sorry. I don't know if I should be cussing on your show.
You're good. You're good, man.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah.
Dude, you cuss all the time. Cuss
yeah,
all the fuck you want.
But they were excited about
That's bullshit, Chris.
they were excited about it. And they're like, yeah, you know, we'll cross promote with you. So it's not the kind of thing where we're like, hey, War Games Atlantic, you know, talk about us all the time. We're just like, hey, we're doing this thing and you guys should talk about it too. And luckily, War Games Atlantic seem to be some pretty cool guys. I don't know any of them in person yet. I'm hoping someday we'll get to meet them. But they seem to be super stoked about anybody who's doing stuff with their plastics. So yeah,
I'm really impressed with their kits. Like I was a little slow on the uptake, so I actually just got my kits for the challenge. But man, those are some pretty cool things. I'm very excited to paint them.
Yeah. So the long-winded thing is basically, you know, someone on our Discord said, "Hey, can you guys do this? I challenge you to do it." And then we extended that to everybody. And so we've been posting on social media using the hashtag Starbreach Challenge, and we're seeing what people can do with these War Games Atlantic figures.
Yeah, so there it is. The gauntlet is thrown down. If you're listening, buy a single box of War Games Atlantic miniatures. They typically run between $29 and $35. As Chris said, it's like 20 to 35, sometimes 40 models in a box. And then just download the free rules from the Starbreach website, build yourself a warband and paint it. And then you can, spend an extra, $20, $30, $40 on a mech. Whatever that is that you want, be it some Infinity tag or something that you commission for a 3D printer, and paint it up.
Yeah. Oh, and just to let people know, this isn't the kind of competition where there's prizes. The only thing you win is bragging rights,
which is the best kind of contest, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the kind of thing that that as a company we don't want to push people like, hey, everything is a competition, and this person's better than this person or whatever. It's sort of like it's a competition, but it's also cooperative. Like everyone should be excited about it. And
right, and
sorry, go ahead.
For us, the most important thing is just having fun painting your miniatures and then pushing your cool toy soldiers around on the table, right? And so this is this is encouraging people to get some inexpensive plastics that they might not otherwise, and play a game that they may have not otherwise tried, right? So it's two super cool things.
Yeah, one of the people who's excited about it is Ashley from Full Metal RPG, which is Brendan's RPG podcast, which if you don't listen to it and you like RPGs, you really should. But Ashley has never played a miniatures game before, and so she's super excited about this, and she's building her first ever army for a miniatures game.
And that's amazing. That's the coolest thing I've heard all week. Very cool. Anything that pushes someone into the miniatures hobby for me, and especially in a really cool way, playing an indie game with indie plastics. It's just I don't know. We live in very cool times right now for the hobby.
Absolutely. Yeah. Brave new world.
For sure. Well, very cool. So that's the contest, and we'll sweep back around, or the challenge, and we'll sweep back around that to the end just to go over some other details and other things that you might want should you start getting into Starbreach. But Chris, you want to kick us off for the interviewing of Elijah part of the podcast?
So Elijah, we've been doing this series, this last few shows called Aftermath, where we're kind of talking about things like what things are going to be like for us post-COVID, that aftermath world. So can you kind of give us the as I've coined it, the 10-minute elevator speech for Starbreach? Kind of give us the rundown, sell us on the game.
That's got to be at least 50, 60 stories, right?
Yeah, we're going up the Willis Tower.
Okay.
It was definitely a gaffe that is now turned into a joke. So it's if you're on a slow 10-minute ride up the Willis Tower and you see somebody with a Games Workshop pen, what is the speech you give them?
That was definitely the brain not catching up to the mouth real quick.
No, I love that. In a real very simple, actual elevator speech level, Starbreach is a model agnostic sci-fi skirmisher that you've always wanted to play, and that you've never really gotten to play because of limitations that come with product line, right? It comes with bloating, comes with trying to sell product, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I always felt like a lot of times rules came second. We're making this thing, and then the rules came second, and, people want to play games, but eventually at some point, if they're tied down too closely to a particular product line, they're not going to be, the balance is not going to be there forever. The fun is not going to always be there forever. People are going to really feel connected, sometimes in really negative, toxic ways, to this specific build they've done or the specific thing they've done. So it's just a really fun model agnostic game, sci-fi focused, any models you want. Tons and tons of different options, tons of different factions that cover pretty much every sci-fi motif imaginable. And we're looking to even expand that eventually. It's definitely going to continue being expanded. We're still working on it. It's like a living document, which is really cool. So nothing's ever going to be set in stone long term, where it's just going to be this kind of broken dead game on the side of the road. We hope to keep it really alive, keep it fresh, keep it going. So there you go. I think I kept it in like 2 minutes, maybe.
Yeah, you did. You did. You got a floor or two in there, not too much. We're good.
Good.
No, that's great. And I think to sort of amend onto that, one of the things that like one of the ways that I describe it when people are asking me about it is I describe it as an amalgam of really smart mechanics. Like it's mechanics from games that you may recognize, but in a way that you don't. And put together in this like very cohesive, very cool way. And so if you could like talk us through some of those mechanics, and also the inspiration for those
Absolutely.
mechanics.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. Definitely the dice pull is very strongly from bolt action. I think that's an absolutely ingenious initiative mechanic. One of the big problems in war games right off the bat is it's not real-time strategy. It is turn-based strategy. And when you get to turn-based, you're immediately hamstringing one player or the other. And there's a lot of ways you can try to balance that, but it always kind of feels like, well, if it's I go, you go, and all my models are going before yours, like we're in significant trouble, right? Or vice versa, where you've kind of built where like, okay, I want to go second, but then you have to go first, It can be a vice versa. But either way, I love just the order dice full, bringing it out of an order dice bag and then placing it. That was something that I had first applied to NCO when I started doing a skirmish level. But then from there, I really began to expand from that. That's about the only thing that it's really similar with bolt action, I would say. And in a lot of other ways, it begins to pick up from different games. Of course, you've got classic, Games Workshop elements, different things that are just classic to some of the older, like Dungeons and Dragons, having stat lines, having profiles, different things like that, but also trying to keep those very minimalist as well. Very simple, easy numbers to read. I've heard some people argue, and I would even agree with them now, and we're looking to kind of adjust like almost too simple, really easy to jump in for like players of all ages. So the other key for our hobby, right, is to invite the next generation to be excited to join, because otherwise we're just going to keep playing until we're all 80, and then when we're dead, it's dead. And I think that would be really sad, right? So I think certain companies are going more towards the painting and the awesomeness and how it looks on the table, and not so much the rules, not so much the accessibility for children or for kids or for families. And I didn't like that either. So a lot of the mechanics that I've built into it also involve very basic arithmetic, very basic concepts that are not difficult to, you're not reading a Bible of rules, right? I think the rules fit on 10 pages, so it's enough to be strategic, but it's not so overwhelming that it's no fun for certain people or certain ages, certain demographics. So
for sure,
that was a big thing too, was we wanted it to be as accessible as possible. When I first made it, I wanted it to be accessible in other languages, English, second language learners. Obviously the whole world doesn't speak English, and the whole world doesn't have a ton of money to just buy rule sets for models, but all over the world, there's people who would love to do tabletop gaming. So our mechanics and how it's written, how the rules are laid out, we also wanted it to be very user friendly. We just kept it really simple, and some of that has come out as not being like always the best. I recognize like there's some things we can update and change, and I'm excited to do that. But I don't think those updates or changes are going to add complexity. They're just going to add that much more smarter mechanics working together, like you said, Kevin. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Perfect. There may be a future question where I try to ask a little bit about what those are.
Sure.
But, some of the things that I like that you've done, and maybe we can talk about a little bit, or, the I mechanic. So like the initiative stat, like specifically, I think is really smart. And then also like the core mechanic of using 2d6 to kind of reduce variance where you can. I was really curious if like what parts of those decisions were intentional and where they came from.
Yeah. Oh, what I forgot to bring up, of course, as well is, I played a ton of Frostgrave when that first came out. Huge fan of Frostgrave. And I played it so much. I started demoing it, and I guarantee I have it recorded that I've either played or witnessed / GM'd at least 200 games of Frostgrave.
Oh, wow.
So I was just doing it all the time, because I would go to these conventions. I'd set up 4 tables next to each other, and I'd invite people to play. So I really grew that game for Joseph. I was kind of emailing back and forth with him, and just was so excited about it. But one of the things, God bless him, that I can't stand is the D20. And I think it's a brilliant role on his part, and he swears by it, and I think that's awesome. But at the same time, I had a lot of players continually mention, like, what about just doing 3d6 or 2d6? The bell curve makes more sense. You're able to everyone kind of is already relating to craps odds, or like a 3d6 roll. Like, if you're kind of into odds, into stats, like 2d6 makes way more sense, or 3d6 system makes way more sense. So for me, when I began to design the game that I wanted to make, that I thought would be fun for people to play, I liked a 3d6 system, but then I also love the idea of one of those numbers being knowable. So basically the initiative line, or what will maybe evolve into a couple different stats, but the same idea, will be, it's like 1 to 7. So maybe a little bit higher than a D6, but then you roll 2D6, you add them all together, and you got a 3D6 bell curve with a number that Yeah.
Right. And that's really great, because like you can still get, a swingy roll here and
Sure,
there,
yeah.
call a D20, but it's a much smoother curve. And I don't know, for me, it feels a lot better. I fall into the camp where I really like the 3D6 curve.
Yeah.
So I just think that's like a real bit of smart design, especially for a sci-fi game where you're supposedly using like trained soldiers, right? And the ones that are more trained have a better initiative stat, and so their 3D6 curve is a little smoother. Whereas like when you're playing Frostgrave, I always like mention it as like half-ass wizards, right? Like they're just like it's a bunch of wizards that basically know what they're doing, but maybe playing with magic they don't understand. And that's how I like soften that D20.
I'm forever calling Frostgrave half-ass wizards now. From now on, man. Like, that's it. It's half-ass wizards from this point forward.
Well, I would demo it for people, and that was just the thing. People loved it, but then it was always like, why am I using a D20? Like, I don't understand. Like, this is, because people would get those bad situations where their warband was wiped, in the first turn or two, not because of build or not because of strategy, but because it was like these crazy rolls, like really big rolls. And
honestly, I didn't think anything could feel worse than rolling triple skull in Blood Bowl. But let me tell you, rolling a 1 in Frostgrave is horrible.
Yeah, it's game over. I mean, and it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't matter who you've built. It doesn't matter what model you're using. It can be very difficult. But anyways, I think it's a great game. Obviously.
Amazing. And we have an episode where I do nothing but praise Frostgrave.
Cool. That's good.
I do love the 3D6 curve though, and I just wanted to like point that out for people who may not know how to play Frostgrave, sort of give them some hints to the mechanics so they get curious and go download the rule book.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like you guys are complaining about Frostgrave. You're gamers, and gamers are never happy about anything, so they're always gonna have. Like it could be the best game in the world, and they're gonna go, but it's true. But this part, or
yeah. And when I say half-ass wizards, I mean that as a term of endearment. Like for me, it's like it's like an exercise in Schadenfreude, right? Like you're just like, oh no, like every time you roll bad.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So one other thing that I wanted to hit on too is just I really enjoy the plasmid system in this game. Or I should just say the magic system in general. I like the plasmids, but like all of the magic, like all of the different schools of magic. Yeah. And I like how like some of them overlap between the things. And I was just curious, where the idea for like those specific things and what the like power level values, and then also like how you tied those schools to specific warbands.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question for sure. I knew from the beginning that I wanted some sort of psychic element, some sort of magic, element. Again, being a big, going to actually something I can really praise about Frostgrave. is what I liked about Frostgrave was these like different kind of schools of magic. And of course, in a sci-fi world, that's not really going to be like magic, which more like psychic ability, whatever. But I really thought that always colored the game interestingly, that it wasn't just fighting. You didn't just like roll, okay, it's range attack or shoot, or I have like this guy has a thing, like a spell or something. But it's like, no, there's like this whole other strategic element of choosing, okay, I've got a opportunity here to like kind of mess with the mechanics of the game using this psychic ability, like kind of, buffing or hexing or manipulating gameplay. And so that was a really big inspiration for me. And then moving that into the sci-fi world, I knew I didn't want to go too crazy with it because it's not half-ass Wizards in Space. Like Joseph just put half-ass Wizards in Space out. That just came out. So I mean, I kind of beat him to it in that sense, but it's not a whole, like, I don't have like 20 schools of magic. And, I've just got these kind of foundations that I think were relatable to every kind of idea of like what warrior or fighting psychic abilities would look like in the future, so that's I just did enough and then kind of, plugged them into each group that would use those psychic abilities. And that's also something too that we're going to see a little bit in a good way. I think it bolstered and changed over time. I would love to add another school or two. I would love to add like another, like a couple like more psychic abilities to each school as well. So yeah. And maybe even seeing in the initiative kind of open up into like having a specific psychic stat for psychic players. So cool.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, I like that. I just like the flavor that it gives your particular warband. It's just like a little bit like because the game, ultimately the rosters aren't massive, right?
Yeah.
You have under a dozen unit choices typically, but a lot of them can take different spells or different psychic abilities. And the psychic abilities that you take, like for me, really help color, especially when you're picking your models too. Like I've been able to have a lot of fun assigning the ones that I thought were the coolest for the way the model looked. And it's just like I don't know. I've really admired that it really helps you add just a little bit of needed flair to your war bands and give them a little bit of personal style. And I don't know, just very cool system, worth checking out.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So you've talked a little bit about glimpses of what we might see in the future. Is there anything that you can detail on? Like, I don't want to like spill any beans that we're not supposed to, or try and drill you for anything we can't talk about.
Should I take this question?
Yeah, sure. Go for it, Chris. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So, yes, there will be stuff coming out, but we can't go into detail about it. So, okay. So there will be more stuff for Star Breach. It's not just one and done.
Neat.
Yeah.
I think just knowing there's stuff on the horizon is really reassuring. I think we've gotten a couple of cool hints just, from casually talking here. So I won't press the
Chris
points.
Chris is gonna have to step in and make sure, he's gonna play that PR.
Chris is like,
he's that press guy.
Well,
Chris is like, wait a minute.
I don't like to tell people like, oh yeah, here's what's getting worked on. And then, because as soon as you say something, people are like, okay, is it out now?
Right.
When do I get it? Is it out now?
Yeah, we've
dude,
a couple of communities for other games. So yeah, I definitely get it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, and Weird went through it with third edition, so we're gamers, right?
Yeah.
Point to like 20 minutes ago in the episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, there will be more. When we'll announce it as soon as we can.
Very
cool.
Neat.
Yeah, Chris and I had a really cool conversation just last week that was very good about outlining, the balance between, revealing things and moving forward and letting it sink. Because when it sits more, I think there is an element where you're like, I don't really like this, but you also see the things you really love, you really appreciate more as well. So we're just keeping that balance in mind, and I've definitely, I can assure you, as Chris said, we're going to have some really cool things coming out, and they're going to come out in different neat, like, release forms. Some of the things are going to be like, maybe some more like errata style forms. Other things are going to be actual like supplements and books. So we're excited about that.
Awesome.
So anyways, like Chris said, I think he laid it out perfectly. Yes. And we'll put it out when it comes out.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And
Yep,
it's ready when it's ready.
I like those answers.
Cool.
Yep.
Cool.
Well, to tie some people over for something that's out that you guys are doing, you guys have made a superhero game.
Ah, yeah.
So it's called Supers, and
Supers,
what kind of made you guys want to go that route with superheroes? Like why that? Why the divergence from the sci-fi world and into the more comic booky superhero world?
Yeah, that's a great question. As a designer, I moved from World War II to Supers, basically because World War II, when you do a squad level World War II, the big challenge is people are not superheroes. People are not, human beings. If I'm Japanese or if I'm American or if I'm German, that's not going to change much of anything. If you get shot a couple of times, you're in trouble. You're not going to live. You're not going to survive. And there's a very realistic element to NCO, the original game that I've written, that really I think has a lot of gravity to it in a good way, a lot of earnest respect for life, because it is about real human beings. But moving that rule set to Star Breach was like this big, I thought like, oh, it'll be easy. I'll just like make up a bunch of alien races and it'll be great. And it very quickly was like, oh my God, because we're opening up this whole new world, like you guys said earlier, of these like specialist trained, like genetically modified or like super evolved, you're entering this new world. So from the beginning with Star Breach, I always also felt that it would adapt really well to kind of a superhero setting as well. But again, making the shift to superheroes, as you'll see in the Supers rule set that's available on my website as well, just for free. It's kind of in the beta stage at this point. What we're seeing is like a new transition where we're not building a war band from factions. You are literally building each superhero individually and then putting them in a team, like with an individualistic motivation, like kind of you choose the team's motivation, but you choose each player, you deck them out, you build the super that you want to play with. And then there's like all those familiar Star Breach rules kind of applicable, and then some new elements as well. So there was quite an evolution of the game as well. And it has really informed, for me as a rules designer, it's really like helped me, because now I'm stepping into these different genres, World War II to sci-fi to like modern superheroes or whatever. Each step of the way is not just a battle of, hey, how can I make money off of a repackaged thing, but it's like, no, how can I make this specific genre fun, accessible, enjoyable on the tabletop, strategic and playable at the same time. And so for me, when I got into Supers, of course, there's a big wave right now, just with Disney's acquisition of Marvel, just putting out insane amounts of IP just everywhere. Boom, 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 boom. The problem is people's favorite superheroes they grow up with in the comic books and movies and TV shows, they can't play together nice on the tabletop, right? And so not always, right? Not always. And so I felt like, again, from the model agnostic kind of punk rock spirit of tabletop gaming that Chris and I both love and enjoy, I just knew we needed a model agnostic superheroes, game, where people can bring anything they want, any type of action, any type of like IP, or create their own, just go crazy and like create their own and, get fun with it, have different really wacky superheroes that they've made on their own. And we've already seen a really, really great response from that as well. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So I've got some follow-up questions.
Sure.
And then just to walk through some of the differences, because I think, these games do very, very much share a lot of DNA, like having read through and poured over and built forces for both games and played at least 2 games of Supers and a lot of games of Star Breach. You got the dice pull mechanic for initiative, but one thing that or for who's going, right, for activations. Now, the thing I want to specifically highlight on, though, is like the differences between the 3 and the 4 on your dice. And so the way this works, if you've never played bolt action, just to go back to this, is you pull a dice out of a bag, and the color of the dice dictates the player whose activation it's going to be. And then that player sets the die, it's a D6, to one of the sides on that die and puts it next to the model they want to activate.
Yeah.
And the die that they set it on dictates what the model's going to do.
Yep.
And where Star Breach is very focused on the tactics you would imagine in a squad-based game, so going down, mending your soldiers, laying down covering fire, firing your weapons, running, etc. Like those are the kinds of actions that you have on your dice. But the 3 and the 4 specifically in supers, I think, are what really set the game apart from Star Breach. And I was wondering if you could just go into that a little bit, because that's really where a lot of the flavor, I feel like, of the combined powers that you assign to your superhero really come into their own.
Yeah. So with supers, one of the things I knew right off the bat was I didn't want to deal with a large squad of models, because when you talk about superheroes, now you're even going beyond just like trained space agents or space warriors. You're talking about supers, right? Like they should be able to take a hit. And the whole feel of the supers book is supposed to be like playing a comic book. So the order dice are called panel dice, right? You pull a panel die, and your super is going to do something that would show up in a panel, right? Like in a comic book. He's going to make a run for it, or he's going to try to make a melee attack, which is going to involve like either grabbing the guy or trying to swing at the guy, or they're going to make a ranged attack, or they're going to like kind of mend themselves, And so I was imagining, as I was building supers, this whole world of what would it look like to play a comic book on the tabletop. And I think a lot of superhero games get it wrong. They try to make basically just a skirmish game, like just another war game, like out of superheroes. And I just think that's really boring. Like I go and I see people playing, and it's cool. It seems like people really enjoy the games they're playing, but it just looks like these really nice painted superhero models sitting next to each other on a really blasé kind of bored, and it doesn't look interesting, and they're just kind of standing there. Squads, you've got like all these guys everywhere, so it's like, if we've only got a few models on the table, how do we make this really interesting, where people are flying around, people want to keep distance, or they want to like get close for a moment and then back off, and like instead of just like we just move our models so they're touching, and now we're like, okay, let's roll some dice until one of these, we take one of these models off, I don't know. I wanted it to make it dynamic. So coming back to those dice, those panel dice, I just felt like these actions needed to make sense for supers. And like in the panel, sometimes you're not just taking one action. They're like trying a combination of actions. Or sometimes they're not just doing one thing, but they're trying to accomplish a multiplicity of things in one moment in time. And we can do that in supers. I don't think we could do that in Star Breach, because then the games would just go forever. Like each one of these models, like, okay, this guy's going to do this, and he's going to do this, and he's going to do this, But in supers, when you're really looking at these like cool like superhero teams, only 4 or 5 supers versus another 4 or 5 supers, you kind of want more flexibility and back and forth between the players while you're playing. And I think that's where, again, the dice mechanics comes in. I roll, you roll. Every time we're playing, there's some action, there's something happening. There's multiple actions to each order. So that's where that comes from. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And finally, being that it is a miniatures agnostic game, where are you pulling your minis from? Like where are you drawing your inspiration? Are you doing like 3D printing? Are you hero forging? Are you using hero clicks? Are you using existing model lines?
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, superheroes does not have, obviously, at all the range that sci-fi models have, or that World War II models have. It's a very new kind of thing. There's a few different companies that have a big market, like Knights models, and some people got in really good when they kind of had like multiple IPs, and so they've got all sorts of models from different different franchises, under the same kind of scale. People really like the Crisis Protocol models. Some of them are using that. Some of them, genius people, I should have bought into it and I didn't. They're using that like Marvel United, kind of that weird card game thing.
Oh, so smart.
But it came with a bajillion like Marvel characters, like all at once. They just dumped it. And then they just did like the X-Men too. So there's just like all these, like, so people bought into that. Same thing with when Zombicide Invader came out, I knew a lot of people who bought that for Starbreach as well, because it was just so many sci-fi models, like inspired models. So not to, give you guys inspiration to go clean out your bank accounts or anything, but but yeah, I mean, there's more and more of those models showing up. For me, when I wrote the rule set, I was deep in the jungles of Myanmar, and so that's kind of where I live and work usually. And so I didn't have a lot of access to that. So I ended up getting a bunch of Legos kind of shipped from China. And I was just using like all these different Legos, because Legos kind of got this magical like grip on all these different superhero IPs as well. So
that's so great.
Yeah. And there's a lot of independent companies that kind of like similar, like figure brick models, kind of same size, make even more expansive, where there's like Watchmen and there's like Image Comics guys and there's like all sorts of cool stuff. So anyways, I kind of picked those up just for play testing. Obviously I'm not going to promote one company over the other or whatever you guys want to do. However people want to play, that's how they play. We're not connected to any particular company. But for me at the time, I didn't have paints. I didn't have like a lot of accessibility to models like where I live overseas. So that worked for me, and it was super fun. It's been great. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I asked, really, right? Cause like it can be hard to maybe know what to buy. And sometimes people are like looking for specific lines or just looking for inspiration for what they could play the game with. And I think a lot of times people get stuck into frameworks. Like if I'm going to play X game, I need X kind of models. And like asking that question was really just to elicit all the broad spectrum of ways you can play this game. There's no reason you couldn't play it with the chibi models that come with Marvel United. There's no reason you couldn't use Marvel Crisis Protocol from Atomic Mass. There's no reason you couldn't use Batman models from Night.
I mean, until this conversation, I would have never thought to use Lego models. Like I would have never thought to use that. Like, because if Legos are Legos, like.
Yeah. We got a great crew of Starbreach guys who are playing with like old Mega Bloks stuff. Like when they did Halo, Halo. Wow. And so they have like a bunch of like Lego stuff. So it's really cool how people come out creatively when you just give them a rule set and you say, go for it. I mean, we live in such a beautiful age. Kevin mentioned earlier, it's the golden age of tabletop gaming. Is. I mean, you can use whatever. There's so many things out there. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I use toys from Gachapon machines. Every time I go to Tokyo, I dump tons of money into Gachapon machines because I love those toys. And so I've got boxes and boxes of them. So that's what I'm using for supers. I'm like, oh, here's, whatever crazy little figure that will work. And those are my superheroes.
Yeah.
And here you go. You got enough scale on your table. Like, there's no reason you couldn't just use like Funkos too, right? Like, you're only gonna have a few on each side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you got the terrain for it and you've got the vision, you can make it awesome. I mean, really, there's no limit for Super Breach, for supers especially. There's no limit. I mean, I'm really excited to see what people come up with. The thing is, too, is I think when we think about supers, we think about a very Western comics element, and Chris brought up a great point. There are really rich, deeply rooted cultural supers, like just super culture from Japan, from China, from India. I mean, every country has their superheroes, has their Thailand's got the Beetle guy, Beetle Man or whatever, I mean, they've all got these different superheroes that they grew up with that they loved. And how fun is that you can put the Dragon Ball Z team down in front of the Justice League or whatever, So we're excited. We're really excited to see what people come up with. It's going to be rad.
Yeah. And I don't know why I didn't think of this. Like my daughter right now is really into My Hero Academia. And I'm like, how can I make like super characters that match up with like Midoriya and Bakugo and stuff like that?
100%.
That would be really fun.
You read my mind. I'll go, because when you said Funko Pops, I was like, man, I could go grab my All Might and just throw them down on the table.
Yeah, and you can really make All Might with the Supers rules too, actually.
And Funko, I think Funko Pop's doing those like little keychains now too. So they're already like that 28, 32 millimeter kind of style, like size. They're chibi, but they're, that's kind of fun too.
If you're like Chris or I, because if you haven't bought any Marvel Crisis Protocol models, you don't know that they always come with a whole frame of bases. So.
Oh, really?
So
okay,
awesome. Like 2 models, and you get 4 bases for those 2 models.
4. Yeah.
Wild. Okay.
And then once because it's like that's how they come out of the mold, right? They come in a pack of 4, and so they just send you the whole mold every time you buy a figure. And even if you buy a single figure, it comes with a whole frame. And so now I'm like, oh wait a minute, I need to start gluing some Funkos and repainting them onto some Marvel Crisis Protocol bases, because I have a ton of them. That's so fun.
Yeah, super fun. Yeah. So the goal with Supers, just like with Starbreach, is, you can bring your favorite IPs into the game, or you can just get totally creative and do whatever you want. And that's the goal, right? Is like total accessibility for all players all around the world. So we're really excited to see what people do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I know one of the things that always upset me, like I used to play City of Heroes from in a video game standpoint, and one of the things that always sucks is like, I want to make Wolverine. He's my dude. I love Wolverine. And every time I make Wolverine, I get slapped with a copyright ban on me because, they don't own that IP. And that's the great thing about what you guys are doing is, you're leveraging these other companies that already have that IP, and you're making a rule set for people just to have fun and like, let's make Superman go up against, Captain America for whatever reason, just because I want to see Captain America get pummeled.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. I mean, it really is. That's the hope, I mean, and, when people, it comes up rarely, but every once in a while people will be like, well, are you concerned about, like what this is doing for the industry or blah, 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 like you're making these like model agnostic vanilla rules and, but you're not doing your own models. Like, why would you do that? And, for me, it's like, dude, all we're doing is just double dip it. It's just adding value, market value to literally every model creator from the lowest of the low, like just like local guy, like just CAD designing, all the way to like the big boys. Like all we're doing is doubling the value of any tabletop model that gets put out. You can apply it. You can use it twice, not just in this game, but in this game, know?
Yeah. So. Can confirm, because I'm designing a game right now that uses that right now for all my testing. I'm using my copy of Blood Rage.
Yeah.
Like
there you go.
The Viking models that are in there are perfect for what I'm doing. So
beautiful.
Like, every company that makes models should thank agnostic designers. Because you're just giving the toys more life for sure.
Absolutely, and I think that's beautiful. I don't think there's anything to be ashamed about that. I think that's really cool.
Not at all. And I think that's the coolest thing.
We're not breaking IPs. I mean, we're not using names. We're not using any sort of. Nope. Yeah. I mean, we're kosher, but it's a really cool thing. I think that's making games that much more accessible.
Yeah, and for Chris, because you may not have read the rules, right? The way that it works is there's like a whole suite of powers in the back of the book, and you have an allocation of how you can build there's limits of how you build each hero, and there's tiers of how powerful those heroes can be. And so then you're basically making a custom hero with some blend of those powers. Mm-hmm. But you can, right? Like you give someone a healing factor and maybe some metal weaponry, and you're getting close to Wolverine.
Oh, you can make Wolverine. Yeah, he's there.
yeah.
For sure. He is buildable 100%.
You can't have a minions agnostic superhero game without Wolverine. I think you'd have a riot on your hands.
Right. Yeah, right. Because you've got rage, regeneration. Like, there's like tons of different things you can do, right? So, I'm with you. I'm just trying to defend that whole like we're not infringing on anything. You can just you can make pseudo Wolverine.
Yeah, that's right.
You can make poor man's Wolverine.
All right, and you said something that was really important there, Elijah, when you were talking about like not making your own models and stuff. And one of the things that I really like about the Starbreach book in particular, so if we're looking at the book, is that the art and the miniature photography. And the reason that I like the illustrations and the art that's in Starbreach is that it's like very evocative of a sci-fi setting, but still allows you to imagine and put yourself in and put your own style down. And what I'm wondering is if you're going to be working like in a similar mentality when you eventually publish Supers, like similar artists, similar miniature photography.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's really cool is we've got models on the way that are they're IP free. Oh, sorry. Hold on. My daughter's like freaking out behind the door over here.
I totally get it.
Yes, baby. Hi. What's up? I'm doing an interview. Yeah. Chatting about my game. You want to come say hi? Yeah, there's my 2-year-old. She's adorable.
Aww.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah. I just put my 3-year-old to bed, so I know exactly what that's like.
Hey. Yeah. We're chatting. What are you doing? Oh, yeah. Daddy's got his earphones on. Yeah, hey, peoples. We're chatting. Okay. I'm doing an interview. Okay.
All right. And so, Elijah, you said something really important when you're talking about the fact that you're not printing models and you're not forcing people into a box. And a way that relates to Starbreach to me is in the miniature photography and the illustrations in Starbreach are amazing. They're like evocative, and they let the player who's playing the game put themselves in, but still draw like deep inspiration from both the illustrations and the miniature photography. And I was wondering if you were going to be following a similar method when you go to publish Supers.
Yes, absolutely. We've already got really great artists on the job. We've got some artists that were with us during Starbreach who are going to also be joining us for Supers. We've also got a couple of new artists that we're really excited about. Particularly, we've got some models that are coming in from, I believe it's, I don't want to be wrong. I think it might be Czech Republic or maybe Denmark. I'm not sure, but there's a guy named Agus, and he's like this legendary painter. He's been in the world for years, but he does a lot of like custom designs, and he's worked with some really cool franchise lists. Different superhero models from like cobblestone castings and like like a couple of those like that are coming from like Brigade Games and like North Star figures, like stuff like that they're carrying. And he's really painted them really neat, and we're getting that package arriving soon. And so we're going to be using them kind of as our promo models, our kind of and he's really excited to get his name in the book, and just the work that he's done is just beautiful, really beautiful models. So from the actual illustration to the physical models, we're hoping for the same idea for those printed, those really nice Super Breach books when we get those done. Yeah, we're excited about that.
Very cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So with, speaking about that, like talking about the books and getting it out, like, so once you said Supers is in beta right now. So once you guys are, ready to release and ready to go live with the game, how are you planning on releasing
We're
that?
We're going to do a
Kickstarter
for it. Kickstarter is the best pre-order method that exists. So that's what we're going to do. That gives us an idea of how many to print, and our turnaround time on our Kickstarters is really, really fast. So, you won't have to wait too long to get it.
So the question that I have, Chris, to follow up for you, because you know me now well enough to know that I like dice.
I knew this question was coming.
Are there going to be some new special cool colored superhero inspired order dice coming, or panel dice coming?
Yeah. Well,
All right.
Yeah. The plan with the order and panel dice is to keep releasing new colors. I don't know how often we're going to do it. The last two colors we did were like this bright neon pink and bright neon green. Yeah, and people seem to really like those.
Those were awesome.
But the idea is we're just going to do, like every 6 months, 3 months, however many months, we feel we need to do, and just do 2 new colors. So that way there's always going to be new colors available. The older colors, as they sell out, will be cycled out, and then new colors will be added in.
As a person who owns every color that's been made so far, I'm very excited to hear that there will be more colors coming.
Yeah.
He might have a problem. Just so you know.
Dude, I'm the same. I'm absolutely a dice goblin. So I think that was a big part of my games, was it needed to have not just rolling dice, but like cool table order dice, instead of these like little chits or little panels, like using the dice as markers. I just thought that was ingenious. So I'm really excited to keep, like Chris said, almost to kind of create a really neat long-term collectible element to the dice that we're not going to reprint. When things are gone, they're gone, and we're going to see people, I think, really enjoy their collections over the years of dice.
And this is another thing, and it sounds really stupid to somebody who doesn't know, but like for someone who plays a lot of tabletop games, like the order dice just have the most satisfying clink, like when you're like reaching around in the order bag for them.
So I don't want to discourage people from buying order dice. You should absolutely buy order dice. But if you don't, you can use any D6s.
Any D6.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
I'm trying to sell people on the merits.
As someone who grew up in the punk and hardcore world, and was, I've been part of that world since the early '80s. Being DIY and doing things yourself is ingrained in my life. I can't ever get rid of that. So I want to, everything I do, it's you're not required to buy anything. You can play Starbreach for free. You can download the rules for free. You can use any D6s. If you want to help support us, please do. We appreciate everyone who does. But I want people to be able to play games. So if you just use, checkers or chess pieces and download the rules for free and never buy anything, like you're still awesome to me as long as you're playing the game. Yep. And if you make your own dice, awesome. Buy some blank dice and draw on them. That's great. I did as a kid. I did that. I couldn't afford to buy band T-shirts, so I would just buy a white T-shirt, which was $2 or whatever, and then I would just draw the band logo myself. And so I'm hoping that there's kids. I hope that there's some 13-year-old out there who's like, man, I love this game, but I only get like $3 a week in allowance, so I'm just gonna buy blank dice, draw my own, download the rules, and play from my iPad or iPhone or whatever as a place to read it.
And that's perfect. And my first dozen games of Starbreach and all of my initial demos were played with like just plain old D6s. So can confirm that it can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reality is in many ways we're future proofing. Punk rock, is a huge part of my life as well. And Chris and I, we have this really neat relationship largely because we were in the music scene for a long time before doing tabletop games. And I love our relationship because it is like a punk rock DIY label. The business, we love seeing people have a good time more than hitting a specific profit, and hitting the profit is rad. But at the same time, if we're future proofing what we're doing basically, because in the future we are going to see IPs, franchises, large companies struggle to keep patents, to keep copyright. And in my personal opinion, that's not a bad thing. I think patents are what makes rich people rich and keeps poor people poor. I think in a lot of ways, like copyright and IP is just a little bit over the top. I get protecting your name. So there's that element when it comes to trademarking and copywriting. But at the same time, with like patents and stuff, or like IPs where you're like protecting and you keep protecting, but people are falling in love with what you do, like you're kind of slapping your audience in the face. And I think what we're doing with our rule set is really, I think, opening that up. And by keeping it free, we're letting people very much so joyously buy in, not buy in because it's like, I have to, but buying in because I want to, and I believe in this, so that's pretty cool. There's a big heart difference between those things,
I 100% agree.
Yeah, that's rad.
All right. Now, given that you may have just really sold this to a few people, where should people go to get the games, and what is available to them at those websites?
You can go to slowdeathgames.com. There is a link to the web store there. Direct link to the web store is slowdeathgames.bigcartel.com. We have a big upgrade coming to the web store soon, but it's not going to change anything for anybody for how they get there. You can get the Starbreach printed rulebook there, so you can get an actual physical copy. You can get the deluxe PDF, which is the same thing as the free PDF, but it adds scenarios, artwork, and a bunch of extra stuff. You can get the order dice there, and you can also get miniatures for our other game, Wild in the Streets, there.
Yeah, and of course, I've got my starbreach.com. So starbreach.com is my personal website that's got all three of the rule sets that I've written. They're available for free. And they, of course, link over to Slow Death Games when there's things available for purchase. So if people are like, hey, let me just check this out first, they can always check out starbreach.com. And at starbreach.com, they'll be able to check out the just kind of the rules and fall in love with it. And then when they're ready to like really buy in and commit and see the cool artwork and all the cool stuff we've prepared for them in the deluxe books, then they can head on over to Slow Death Games.
Very cool.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for both being on.
Yes, thank you guys.
Honestly, super exciting to have you guys here. And what I want to leave you with is an opportunity to plug anything you want to plug. If it's a friend's podcast, your podcast, a game, anything in particular that you think people should pay more attention to, plug away.
Oh,
Why don't you go first, Elijah?
So much power. I mean, I'll be honest, we keep in mind and be educating yourselves on the situation in Myanmar, where I come from, where I work, where I love. We have lots of students and businesses there that I'm a part of. And just be thinking and learning, educating yourself about that situation there. I can't speak to in detail, but please just Google it. Beautiful country, in a lot of trouble right now. So check them out. We've got lots of stuff coming. Like Chris said, we had to be a little secretive. We're not telling you when it's coming out, but we do have things coming. We're working every day on really cool stuff for all the games that I do. So we're really excited about that.
And if I can plug something, and I'm going to feel like a jerk because I'm just going to plug material things, and where Elijah was, he had something actually important to the world.
It's okay.
Plug materially.
Yeah. So everyone already knows Starbreach is listening to this. Grab the PDF. The PDF has all the rules. The free PDF has all the rules, everything you need to play. Then when you want to support us, go over to slowdeathgames.com, grab a copy of the book and the dice. We have another game called Wild in the Streets with a bunch of miniatures available. You can go check that out. The rules for Wild in the Streets fit on a postcard. It's a super fast and furious gang fight game. And then if I can plug some other people's things, if you like RPGs, please check out Full Metal RPG. It's a great podcast. Brendan, who is part of Slow Death Games and does a lot for us, it's his podcast, and I highly recommend it. It's a great RPG podcast. But if you have younger listeners, just be aware that it is R-rated for language and content. So be ready for that. I think that's all I really have to plug.
All right, cool. Chris, you want to read us out?
Yeah, sure. So really appreciate you guys being on the show. Thank you for your time. You guys are awesome. Thank you to our patrons. You guys are best. That's why we're here for you guys as well as everyone else. So thank you to Static as a City for the intro and outro music. Come join us on our Discord. We've got conversations happening every single day. And as many as Discord as I'm in, I will say I will tote it. We are the best Discord out there. And just find us on the Instagrams and the Facebook and the Tweeters.
Thank you again for having us.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, for sure. Bye. All right, cool.